I never went to believe strange things, you know? I'm just a normal guy, father of two, who works late at the makeshift office here at home to handle the accounts. But in recent weeks, I started hearing some weird noises from the garage, always around midnight. At first, I thought it was the wind hitting things or some animal sharing the trash. It was a half-stuffy tack-tack, sometimes a light drag, as if something was being moved. I ignored it, told myself it was bullshit, but that was getting more frequent, more insistent. My wife even joked that I was getting paranoid, but I felt a cold in the spine every time I heard. It was as if something wanted to pay attention. One night, already tired of trying to guess, I decided to take a look. I took the phone's flashlight, put on my slipper, and went to the garage, my heart beating a little faster than I wanted to admit. When I opened the door, silence swallowed me for a few seconds, but then I saw. My tools were all organized in a different way. The hammer, which I let thrown on the bench, was aligned with the screwdrivers, all right, almost obsessive. And the window, the one that I never opened because of the hard lock, was boxed, just a little, enough to let the cold air come in. I swear I didn't move there, and my wife wasn't going to do that at midnight. I closed everything running, returned home and locked the door, feeling a weight in my chest that didn't explain. That was no wind or animal. There was something wrong. The next morning, I was still trying to convince myself that it had just been a weird night, you know? But then, as I took the trash out, I saw some marks of muddy boots near the back door. It was no little, they were deep footprints, as if someone had stepped in there, and the clay was fresh, stuck to the concrete. My stomach nodded. My wife and I wear tennis at home, and the kids don't even go out for that side of the backyard. I went to ask the neighbors, hit the house of SU Jorge and Dona Marcia, but no one saw anything, no one passed there. They even looked at me strange, as if I was inventing. I came home with my head 1,000, feeling that someone was watching me, but there was no one around. I decided to install a cheap camera that I bought on the market, those that record with motion sensor. I put her pointed at the garage, called my cell phone and let rolling. But man, I didn't have the courage to look at the recordings. The noise continued, that tall, louder, clearer, like an insistent talk-talk, as if someone hit a pipe. I stayed in the living room, looking at the cell phone on the table, the icon of the application flashing with movement notifications, but my hands trembled just thinking about opening. My wife slept in the room, the kids were quiet, and I there, alone with that noise surrounding me. It was like something I wanted to go there again, but I couldn't move. Fear was swallowing me alive. I spent the rest of that night in the living room, with the TV on just to make noise and try to ignore the sounds of the garage. But it was no use. The talk-talk was in breaks, sometimes stopped for a few minutes, then came back stronger, as if testing my patience. I looked at the corner cell phone with an eye. The camera app already had about 5 notifications, and I imagined 1,000 things. A thief, an animal, or whatever. Around 3 in the morning, silence finally fell. But it was not a quiet silence. It was heavy, as if something had given up calling me. I didn't sleep. I got there, sweating cold, waiting for the day to lighten. When the sun came out, I got up with soft legs and went to check the garage again, praying not to find anything. I opened the door slowly, and this time there was not only the organized tools. The bench was clean, impeccable, as if someone had passed a cloth, and in the corner, near the window, had a pile of nails that I didn't even remember. The window was closed, but the lock was loose, almost falling, as if someone had forced her. My heart fired, and I ran to look at the footprints outside again. But the floor was clean, without mud. Nothing. It was as if everything had been erased. I came back and took the phone, the finger hanging over the camera app. I knew I had to see what had been recorded, but my whole body shouted for me to let it go. Fear was mixed with a sick curiosity, and I didn't know what was worse. I finally created courage and opened the app, but my hand trembled so much that I almost knocked my cell phone. The first recording was 017 and showed the dark garage, only with the weak shine of the light of the pole outside entering the window. There was nothing for a few seconds, just silence, until I heard that low tock-tock from somewhere outside the painting. Then, very slowly, a shadow passed in front of the camera, just a dark blur, but you could see that it was tall, thin, and moved without haste. My heart stopped for a second. I couldn't see a face, no details, just that shape sliding to the corner of the screen. I paused the video, feeling the sweat drip by the forehead, and tried to take a deep breath, but the air didn't come. I passed the next clip from 103, and this time the camera took something worse. The window was ajar again and had a skinny, pale hand pushing it up, the fingers too long to look normal. The tock-tock got louder, and I saw the shadow of before coming back, now stopped right in front of the bench. She didn't mess with things, she was just there, as if looking at the camera, staring at me through the lens. My stomach rolled, and I dropped the phone on the table, with the video still running. The sound stopped suddenly, and when I looked again, the screen was black, as if the battery was over, but the phone was full. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or scream. I just know I was terrified. After that, I couldn't stay in the room anymore. I grabbed my cell phone and climbed to the room, locking the door as if it were to protect me from whatever was out there. My wife woke up with the noise and asked what was happening, but I just muttered that it was nothing and lay down beside her, trying to calm me down. The rest of the morning was a blur. I didn't talk about the recordings to anyone or the kids, who were having coffee as if nothing had happened. But I kept looking at the bedroom window, the door, to any dark corner, feeling that something was still around. The day went slow, and I avoided the garage as if it were a cursed place. Fear was stuck to me, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. When the night fell again, I was already waiting for the noise, but this time nothing came. The house was quiet, a silence that almost zombie in my ears. I went to the garage with my cell phone in my hand, the flashlight on, and checked everything. The tools were messy as I left, the window was locked, and had no sign of footprints or anything out of place. It was as if nothing had happened, as if all this horror had evaporated. I looked at the recordings again in the app, but the night clips were corrupted, only squeaking and black screen. I don't know what that was, if it was someone kidding me or something worse, but it has stopped out of nowhere, and to this day I have no answer. I just know that I will never forget that day. I try not to think too much about it now, but sometimes when I get late working, I feel a shiver and look at the garage door unintentionally. I didn't tell my wife everything. I just said it was an animal or something, because I didn't want to scare her or the children. But man, I know what I saw in those recordings, and it wasn't an animal, not an ordinary thief. That hand, that shadow, the way everything was tidy, it was methodical, almost like someone or something wanted to leave me a message. What's worse is that I have no proof. The videos disappeared, and the mud marks never returned. It seems that it was only that night that hell decided to visit me. To this day, I avoid being alone at home after midnight. I put an extra lock at the back door and never moved in that camera. It's thrown into a drawer, and I don't even know if it works. The silence of that last night made me more relieved, but also more confused. Why did you stop? What was that? I wonder if I did something to attract this thing, or if it was just bad luck. I don't have the courage to ask neighbors again, nor to shy away too much, because deep down I just want to forget. But there are nights that I swear I hear a tock-tock softly, far away, and my heart fires again. Maybe it's just my head, but I don't risk going after it anymore. I work on the night shift at a convenience store a few months ago, and I always make the same route after working hours. That night was tired as hell, but with an absurd hunger, so I decided to stop at the 24-hour gas station near the highway to buy a snack. It was all quiet, almost empty, only me and the attendant inside. I paid my snack and left, but when I opened the car door, I noticed something strange. I had a parked car a little far away, near those trucker trailers, all dark, without the linked headlights. He looked abandoned at first glance, but something bothered me. I can't explain it properly, but I had this weird feeling that he wasn't really alone. I stared for a few seconds, trying to see better, and that's when I realized there was someone inside. I couldn't see who it was, right? But you could see the shine of a cell phone or something illuminating the person's face. I shivered total. It was fast, but I decided to get in the car and start soon. I didn't want to stay there even another second. As I left the post, I tried to convince myself that it was just my paranoia. You know? Like, relax, it's just someone resting. But that image was in my head, and I knew I was wrong. I decided to take an alternative path and go to the parking lot of a supermarket that closes late. A place where sometimes I stopped to rest before returning home. But when I got there, my heart froze. That same car was parked across the parking lot, again with the headlights. I froze for a few seconds, trying to understand what the hell was happening. It made no sense. How had that car arrived there before me? I came straight from the post. I didn't even pass somewhere else. My mind started running, thinking of all possibilities, but none of them were good. I tried to calm down and said to myself that maybe it was just coincidence. After all, I couldn't be absolutely sure it was the same vehicle, right? But then, when I was almost able to convince myself, I saw two shadows getting out of the car. Two very high men in dark clothes. They weren't looking at me at first. They just seemed to talk as they smoked, but soon one of them turned their heads toward me. At the time, I felt my stomach wrap. I don't know how to explain what I felt at that moment. It was as if the whole air was sucked from the environment. I was paralyzed, not knowing what to do, but I knew I needed to get out of there. The problem is that my car was parked a little far away, and they were coming slowly toward me. It looked like they were trying to look casual, but something in their way shouted that it was intentional. My hands began to sweat so much that I could barely hold the key. I entered the car as fast as I could, trembling, and started. In the rearview mirror, I saw that they had stopped walking and were now standing side by side, staring at me. The scene was so bizarre that it hardly looked real. I left as fast as I could, but my heart was 1,000. I didn't know if they had noted my sign or if they would try to follow me, so I decided to get several random streets to mislead. It was a shit because I know that area very little and I was afraid to end up lost somewhere even more deserted. Every corner I bent, looking at the rearview mirror waiting to see that car appear behind me. But fortunately, it didn't happen. When I finally got home, I looked at all the doors and windows, as if that were going to advance something against someone really determined. I could only think, who were those guys? Why did they look like they were following me? It made no sense. I was awake for hours, trying to turn on the points on my head. I thought of all the people I had recently met, trying to remember if anyone had given me or demonstrated some strange behavior. But nothing came to mind. The next day, when I told my brother about what had happened, he told me something that made me cold. A former workmate, who had been fired a few months ago because of aggressive behavior, had been seen prowling the convenience store where I work. He was low and thin, so it was probably not one of the people I saw in the parking lot. But that didn't reassure me at all. In fact, it just made me think that maybe I was being observed longer than I imagined. That information from my brother made me even more paranoid. I started passing on every last few days in my head, trying to remember if I had seen something strange or someone suspicious prowling the store. Not that I could pay close attention because the movement there is always crazy, but now everything seemed different. Each client I served, every car that went slowly in front of the store, everything gave me chills. I was so obsessed with that I even asked a friend of mine who works in the safety of a mall nearby, take a look at the cameras of the region to see if I found any records of that car. He promised to help, but said he couldn't do miracles. Even so, I was waiting for any news as if it were the most important thing in the world. In the following days, I began to feel like being watched all the time. It was a horrible feeling, you know? Like when you're walking and you are sure someone is watching you, even without seeing it directly. I was looking out the store window from time to time and swore to have seen the same car slowly, but I was never sure enough to write down the sign or call the police. They were probably going to think I was freaking out. The worst thing was that I couldn't sleep properly. Every night I woke up scared, thinking I had heard noises outside. My head was a total mess, and I no longer knew what was paranoia and what was real. The thing was so intense that I even thought of resigning the store. But at the same time, I didn't want to give this taste to anyone who was doing this to me. It looked like I was being tested, as if someone wanted to see how far I could take it before I gave up. I could barely focus on work, and the other employees began to notice that something was wrong. One of the girls even asked if I was okay, because I kept looking out the window all the time and looked tense. I tried to disguise it, but it was hard to hide. Deep down, I just wanted it to end soon, but I wanted to be that easy. So one night, something that made me completely terrified. I was leaving work later than usual. I was going from midnight, and when I arrived in my car, I noticed something different. I had a note stuck in the windshield. My heart fired on the spot. I took the paper with tremendous hands and read what was written. It was simple, just a short sentence. "You shouldn't be here." I had no signature or anything, but that was enough to make me lose the little calm that was still left. I got in the car and got out of crazy, without even looking at the rearview mirror. I just wanted to get home, lock everything, and try to understand what the hell was happening to me. I got home shaking so much that I could barely stick the key in the lock. When I finally entered, I locked everything, put a chair against the door, and sat on the floor of the living room, trying to breathe. The ticket was in my hand, wrinkled from so much I tightened. "You shouldn't be here." What kind of message was that? Whoever was doing this with me clearly knew of my routine. I knew where I worked, where I parked my car, even where I went after work. It was like I was an easy target, completely exposed without even realizing it. I was thinking about it for hours, trying to find some sense, but the more I thought, the scared I got. In the following days, I decided to completely change my routine. I started to leave work through a different door, parked my car away from the store, and took alternative paths to go home. I even stopped going to the supermarket where the first incident had happened. I thought that if I changed everything, I might be able to mislead whoever was following me. But do you know when you do everything to avoid something and still have that feeling that you are being observed? This is exactly how I felt. No matter what I did, paranoia wouldn't leave. And the worst is that I no longer knew who to trust or what to do. My life became an infinite cycle of fear and uncertainty, until one night, something happened and everything changed completely. I was coming home after one more exhausting day, trying to keep calm because I had managed to get there without any strange sign or suspicious car following me. I was starting to think that maybe I had finally misleading anyone. But when I stopped in an empty traffic light on a deserted street, I looked at the rearview mirror and there he was. The same dark car, with the headlights erased, leaning slowly behind me. My heart fired on the spot. I didn't think twice. As soon as the signal opened, I accelerated like crazy, but this time they didn't come after. When I got home, I locked everything and called my brother. Desperate, he said he was going to go to my house to see how I was. But before he arrived, something even more bizarre happened. As I waited for him, sitting on the couch trying to calm me down, I heard knocks on the door. It was soft, almost hesitant, but enough to make me freeze. I looked at the magical eye and saw no one. The beats continued, now more insistent, and I started trembling so much that I could barely breathe. I took the baseball club that my brother had given me to guarantee security, and I was paralyzed while the beats suddenly stopped. A deadly silence took over the place. And then, as if nothing had happened, I heard the noise of steps moving away from the door. I ran to the window to try to see who it was, but the street was completely empty. It was as if the person had evaporated in the air. When my brother arrived minutes later, I was already on the edge of a nervous collapse. My brother tried to calm me down, said he was probably just some drunk neighbor or a bad joke, but I knew it wasn't that. Whoever was doing it with me was having fun with my fear, playing with me like a cat plays with a rat before killing. He stayed at my house late, and as much as I hated admit, I was relieved that I was not alone. But when he left, The feeling of insecurity came back with everything. I couldn't sleep properly, always thinking someone was going to appear out of nowhere. I got to the point of installing cameras around the house, changing the locks, and even thinking about buying a large dog to increase my safety. But as precautions I took, that feeling of being watched never left. The last strange thing happened about a week later. I was coming home at night, as always, and noticed something different. The dark car was just not there. No sign of him, neither on the way or close to my house. It was so abrupt that they seemed that they had given up for good, without further explanation. For weeks, I was waiting for some new onslaught, but nothing happened. Neither the ticket nor the knock on the door nor the steps. It was as if everything had been erased suddenly. To this day, I have no idea who these people were or what were their goal. Sometimes I think maybe it was just some cruel joke. But another part of me knows that there was something much darker behind it. And this doubt still haunts me, because never knowing the reason is much worse than any answer. I work at a restaurant near the university, and I always take the last bus to return home. It's a quiet time, almost never there are a lot of people in it, just a few night workers and lost students like me. But in recent weeks, I began to notice a strange thing. There was a man who always entered the same point, like about 5 minutes after I boarded. He wore a large hood, which covered much of his face, and sat a few rows behind me. I'm not noticing a lot on people, but he drew attention because it seemed different. I can't explain exactly why, but I could feel that he was there in a kind of heavy way, as if it occupies more space than it should. At first, I thought it was just my impression, maybe tiredness or paranoia, since I work late and stay alone in that practically deserted line. But then I realized that he did it every night, without fault. And it wasn't just the fact that he was always there, it was as he acted. He was quiet, immovable, and I could swear I felt that look at him dug on my neck. It's not exaggeration, I swear. I was trying to convince myself that it was just paranoia. But sometimes, when I turned my head very slowly, pretending to look out the window, I could see him there, half hidden by the seat back, but definitely eyeing me. And the worst is that he never came down before me. Never. This started to make me really nervous. One night, I decided to test something. Instead of getting down at my usual point, I was another stop on the bus, just to see what he would do. When the driver announced my original point, I felt that cold in my belly, but I kept my calm and kept sitting. The man in hood did not move. He stayed there, quiet, without even looking out the window. Only when the bus went ahead did he finally rose and got down on that empty point, my point. I tried to convince myself that it was coincidence, but that made me even more restless. The next day, I went down to my normal point, and there he was again, as always. But this time, when I left the bus, I took a quick look back. He was standing there at the point, alone, just watching as the bus left. He didn't take another bus, it didn't leave. It was there, immovable, until I turned the corner. It left me with a knot in my stomach. Worst of all was last week. The bus broke shortly after I entered, and the driver warned us that we would have to wait a replacement for almost an hour. There was no way to go back to the restaurant or to university, so I decided to go home. It was late, but I know the way, and I thought it would be faster than standing there, nervous, thinking about him. For a few minutes, I really relaxed, thinking that maybe he hadn't even got down this time. But after about 10 minutes walking, I started to feel something strange. I can't explain it properly, but it was like I could feel someone behind me, even without hearing steps. I turned my head discreetly, trying to look natural, and there he was, about 20 meters away, walking slowly, without running or trying to reach me, just following me. My heart began to beat so strong that I could feel in the temples. I didn't know what to do. My first reaction was to tighten the step, but I didn't want to look desperate or draw too much attention, especially because I was alone on that dark street. So I just walked faster, trying to convince me that he was probably going somewhere there too. But then I realized that no matter how much I accelerated, he always kept the same distance. It didn't approach or stay behind. as if measuring me, studying my movements. It made me cold. I was almost running when I got to my street, and that's when something even weaker happened. As soon as I turned the corner, I looked back again, and there was nowhere to hide, no side street or alley. He was there a second ago, and in the other, he had disappeared as if he had never existed. I entered home shaking so much that I needed about 10 minutes just to get the key to the key. That night was one of the worst of my life. I couldn't sleep, reliving every detail in my head, trying to understand what had happened. Was he really following me? Or was it just my paranoia? I even thought of telling someone, but I thought they were going to think I was exaggerating or inventing things. The next day, I went to work a little apprehensive, hoping it would not appear on the bus. But he was there, as always, sitting a few rows behind me, with that hood covering his face. Only this time he was not quiet. When the bus stopped at my point, I swear I heard something softly, almost like a whisper, coming from his direction. It seemed like a laugh, but so weak that I wasn't sure if it was real or just my head. Desperate, I ran down and didn't even look back. That laugh, or whatever it was, stamped in my head for the rest of the night. I couldn't stop thinking about it, as if it were any kind of warning or provocation. I tried to convince myself that I was exaggerating, that perhaps it was just someone else on the bus. But deep down I knew I had come from him. That week, I started to change my routes and schedules, trying to avoid any similar situation. I even asked a workmate to change shifts with me one day, just to see if he would appear again. But he always arose, as if he knew exactly where I would be. At the bus stop, in the same place with that huge hood covering the face. And the worst was that no one seemed to notice anything strange about him. For the other passengers, he was probably just another tired guy coming home late at night. But for me, he was different, as if it did not belong to that place. On Friday, something that made me even more terrified. I was so nervous that I decided to go down 2 stops before my street and take an alternative path, just to ensure. It was a busier street with some bars still open, so I thought it would be safe. But when I passed one of the bars, I noticed that I had a large mirror on the outside wall. And in the reflection, I saw him. He was there, behind me as always. Only in the reflection, he was not wearing the hood. At least that's what it seemed. I couldn't see it right because I turned my head too fast, scared, and when I looked again, he was normal with the hood covering his face. It looked like I was going crazy. I shook my head, trying to ward off that image, and entered another bar crowded just to feel safer. When I left, he was no longer there. Or maybe I didn't have the courage to look back. After that night, I started to feel like being hunted. I could no longer relax even indoors. Whenever I heard some noise on the street, a car passing, leaves being blown by the wind, I ran to the window. Sure, I would see him outside, standing in front of my house. I got to the point of asking my sister to sleep with me a few nights, just not to be alone. She found it strange, but said it was just tiredness or stress. I wanted to believe it too, but I knew it wasn't my imagination. He was everywhere, even when I tried to change my routes or schedules. On Sunday, I had to go back to work at night again, and he appeared on the bus as usual. This time, I sat in front, near the driver, hoping that it would make me safer. But I felt that weight in the air again, as if he was watching me, studying every movement of mine. When I looked at the reflection of the window, I saw that he had his head down, as if nap. Only their hands. They were supported on their knees, completely immovable like those of a statue. When I got home that night, something even more bizarre happened. I was so nervous that I decided to take a walk in the block to try to lighten the mind. It was a bad idea. As soon as I passed the corner, I felt that familiar sensation, someone following me. I turned abruptly, ready to confront him, but there was no one there, or rather, almost no one. At the end of the street, far away, you could see a stopped silhouette under a pole of light. It was him, I was sure, but what made me completely cold was what he was doing. He was not just stopped, he was watching me, his head tilted strangely, as if he was curious. And then, for no apparent reason, he raised his arm slowly and pointed to me. It didn't shout, it didn't run, nothing. He only stayed there, pointing, before disappearing again in the shadows. I ran home and locked all the doors, praying for it to end soon. That scene did not leave my head for days. I could barely sleep, afraid that he would appear outside my window or inside my nightmares. I spent the whole week trying to avoid him, taking different buses, returning at strange schedules, even asking for friends when possible. But he always found a way of being there. Until one night, after another exhaustive shift, I decided to face fear. I decided I wouldn't let him control my life, even if it meant being face to face with him. I got on the tremendous bus, waiting to see him sitting in that place as usual. But he wasn't there. I was relieved at first, thinking that maybe he had given up or gone after someone else. But as the bus was following his journey, I realized that something was wrong. The driver drove strangely, as if nervous, and the few passengers looked tense as well. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw his hood reflected. He was sitting in front, next to the driver. When the bus finally arrived at my point, I practically jumped out, running without looking back. But as soon as I went home and closed the door, I realized something that made me completely paralyzed. My jacket, the one I had worn at work, was torn on my back with two long, thin cuts, as if something sharp had scratched the fabric. It had not happened at work or on the bus, and I had felt nothing. Since then, I have never seen him again, neither on the bus, nor on the street, nor anywhere. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I feel that weight in the air again, as if he was still around, just watching, waiting. And to this day, I have no idea what he wanted with me.